Carrie, and welcome to my January wrap-up video. I actually impressed myself. I read a lot of books this month. Usually I read like maybe, I don't know, like 10 books, but this month I was able to do like 18 books, so I'm really feeling myself and I'm super excited about it. So let's just jump right in because I don't want to make this a super long video because I have a lot to go over. The first book I read was A Cloud by Day, A Fire by Night, Finding and Following God's Will by A.W. Tozer. I love him. He's a great theologian. He's a great philosopher. What he did in this book was basically tell the story of Moses helping the children of Israel get out of slavery and using that same kind of the guidelines of how they were listening to God and following His Spirit and how we can use those same principles today. So I gave it a 4-star. I thought it was really good. I've read a lot of other theologians like C.S. Lewis. I even have read some John Piper, but I really like A.W. Tozer the best because I feel like his books are kind of more fast-paced and they're not boring. The next book I read was The Inheritance Games, which is the first in the series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I'm sorry to everybody. I gave it a 3.5. My best friend Wendy was like, ugh. But I liked it. I feel like young adult is not entirely my lane sometimes. I kind of have to get in the mindset of really like, okay, this is young adult. This is not going to be crazy wild. But what I really did like was it kind of reminded me of this movie called Knives Out and also the game of Clue. Just kind of a cute, fun mystery. There's an heiress, or not an heiress, there's an inheritance that gets given to this girl. She becomes like this heiress of a billionaire fortune, but she's not a family member, and so you're trying to kind of figure out the mystery of why she got it, and there's a lot of puzzles involved. It's a really fun, quick, fast-paced book. I gave it a 3.5 stars because I think I just read it on the heels of reading Tog, and if you don't know what that is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. And because I read Tog first and then I read that, I felt like I didn't give it a fair shake. Maybe the other books will be better. Okay, so the next book that I read was Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Today's Culture. Love this book. I gave it a 4-star. I think it's really important to be able to like defend your biblical position to your children if they have questions that they, get from people at school, like, hey, why does teacher so-and-so believe this and we don't, or why does my friend believe this is right but I don't? So it was like a really good book to train you on how to respond to those situations in a really good biblical way. The next book is by my father-in-law, actually, Terry Young, and his book is A New Life in Christ, Becoming Established in Your Newfound Faith. I gave this one a 6-star because he's my family. I thought it was really, really good. I love the way that he writes. He writes in a way that can be really easily accessed and understood, and I feel like anyone who is new in their faith would really like this book. It talks about all the foundations of what we believe. Okay, so the next book was by R.F. Kuang. I love her. I believe she is a Chinese American writer. Hopefully I'm right. I believe I am. The book, Yellowface, was just such a wild ride. It was a mystery. It was about political issues in the publishing industry, how a lot of publishing companies will favor minority authors over white American authors. And so there was like a lot of like angst in politics, and also there was like a mystery behind it because the main character, she has a best friend who's a Chinese immigrant, and her parents were. And they both go to the same college. They both, are in writing, but one of them gets like way more opportunities than the other. And so it kind of just sheds a light on like maybe how some publishing companies are a little bit showing favoritism towards minority authors. And so I liked the story. I gave it a 3.5 because it was just a little bit drawn out, and there were some parts that I felt like I was like, okay, does this serve the plot? So the next book that I read was Demon Copperhead. I believe this is supposed to be kind of like a David Copperfield kind of vibe, and it's by Barbara Kinslover, who wrote the Poisonwood Bible. I loved this book. I said I loved it, but I gave it a 3-star. The only reason I gave it a 3-star is because it was too long. I don't have a problem with long books, but if it does not serve the plot and you're just dragging things out for an eternity, then I don't like it so much. It follows a boy who has a difficult home life, and he goes into the foster care system, and it kind of shows how the foster care system can be really bad and not really work in your favor, and it just exposes a lot of maybe government agencies that could use some work. It's about a Kentucky county and how drugs and opioids and different things have kind of infiltrated the young community there. So it was a good read. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so the next book that I read, but I didn't actually count towards my January wrap-up, but I want to mention it in case you are someone who's ever experienced loss in their family. The book by John Burke, What's Life After Death? Evidence of Heaven, was a really good book. I felt like there were so many stories about people who had real life accounts of dying and going to heaven, and this book was just so good. The next book on my January wrap-up was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. Such a great book. I 4-starred it. It was a very fresh take on like a psychological thriller. It has Alias vibes if you've ever seen that Jennifer Garner show. She's a spy, she's a thief, she's just kind of like infiltrating different people's lives who've done something wrong and taking something back that they took illegally or wrongfully. And there's also a really sweet love story in it too. So it was a great book, great psychological thriller, but also not super dark. The next book was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. I love this author. She's an indie author. She's self-published. A lot of her books, I believe. And she wrote the book Lotus, which I really, really like. And not all of my friends loved these books. Actually, my best friend DNF'd this book, and me and my other best friend love this book. We think it's great. I 5-starred it. Still Beating is such a great story about trauma. I felt like the whole story was an education on how to kind of help someone who's gone through a really difficult trauma, like so bad that it could affect their entire life. The 2 characters in the story have been kidnapped. There's a lot of abuse. There's a lot of trigger warnings. Please read the trigger warnings. But I loved it because it shows how someone who went through a trauma can come back to their life, and they're either going to thrive or they're going to flop based on the support that they have and the family that helps them. So I love this story. It's great. It's a psychological ride because you're trying to find how someone can cope with that much trauma. The next book I read was by Joy Prouty. She's great. She's a mother. She's a photographer. Her book, Practicing Presence, A Mother's Guide to Savoring Life Through the Pictures We're Already Taking. I gave it a 5-star. It was so much more than just a book on photography, because the premise of the book was that we take a lot of photos that are unnecessary and none of them can really be used as memories for our children, and it challenged us to be more purposeful in our photography that we take for like our kids, and that we're trying to capture the spirit behind the moment and not just a staged photo. But it became so much more than that. She talked about her childhood struggles. She talked about an abusive parent. She talked about how she went through anxiety and depression over losing someone. She talked about a death in their immediate friend group. So it was a lot of like deeper, richer themes than just photography. It was excellent. The next book I read, which I didn't put on my wrap up, but it's worth noting, it was a NetGalley book, and it was 180 Devotions to Hush Your Inner Critic by Donna Maltese. It was really good because I'm a perfectionist. I'm very hard on myself. I'm not a perfectionist in all things, but I'm definitely someone who like gets paralyzed by not being able to move forward if I don't think I can do something well. So I feel like this was a really good book to just kind of like tell you to like give yourself a break and like be kinder to yourself. So I really liked it. The next book I read was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I mean, enough said. Every Kristen Hanna book I feel like is just going to be an automatic 5-star for me. My best friend Wendy got me onto her as an author. I love her. She is so poetic. She writes about historical fiction, but from such a beautiful stance. It's not boring, it's not flat, it's just very colorful. This book follows World War II, the German invasion into France, and a beautiful family and how the war affected them. It's also about a real life person, a true story about a girl called the Nightingale, which was her code name, who helped a lot of downed pilots in World War II. Excellent read, like wow. I just finished her arc, which is an advanced reader copy of The Women, and it is about the Vietnam War, and I lived in Vietnam, so it was so good. You should check that out. It was great. The next book I read, kind of embarrassed to say I read it, but it's fine, was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I mean, embarrassed because like the book was a little wild. There were some parts that I had to kind of skip around through. It is definitely a very, I would say, open door type of romance. So if you're not someone who's comfortable with that, definitely be careful. But the storyline, the plot, if you can kind of get around some of the more, I guess, scenes that you make you a little bit uncomfortable, the plot was really strong. It is about Nesta, and if you follow A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is her whole series, Feyre is the main character, and most of them, and Nesta and Elaine are her sisters, but this follows Nesta's story, and she is dark, broody, anxiety-ridden. It's a coming-of-age kind of story to where she's trying to find herself because she is a human turned fae against her will. So it was a really good story. I liked it. There's a great romance. Once again, it's a little wild. The next book I read was by Rupi Kaur. She is an Indian immigrant, poet, haiku writer. It's called The Sun and Her Flowers. I just love her. I just feel like she writes what I think and how I feel, and she puts into words something I couldn't express, and so I just really enjoy her. 5-star. And if I didn't say it, I don't think I said A Court of Silver Flames, I gave it a 4-star. Because it was a little... Okay, the next book I read was Heartless Hunter. This was a NetGalley book. It was an advanced reader copy, and I feel very validated because I loved this book. There were some elements that were a little bit weirdly not hygienic to me, and so I gave it a 4-star, but I feel very validated because it's the book of the month for Barnes & Noble, and I was like, okay, I found a gem because I really liked this book and they like it too. So it's about a witch and a witch hunter, the captain of the Blood Guard, which is a new regime in this community that is trying to purge the community of all the witches. And the captain of the Blood Guard, who's trying to hunt down all of these witches, is trying to find this girl called the Crimson Moth, who is a vigilante who will find witches and actually help them escape before they're purging, before they're killed. And so there's a love story between them because the captain of the Blood Guard kind of is chasing down this vigilante, and then there's a love story that happens and a love triangle. And the last 4 chapters were some of the most epic chapters I've ever read. So it was a really great story. You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. I gave it a 3-star. This is my first read from her, and I just kind of felt like 70% of the book, like nothing was happening at all. I kept telling my friend, my best friend Megan, I was writing to her, I'm like, okay, 60% in, nothing's happening. 70% in, nothing's happening. And I feel bad because I actually told her to buy me this book for my birthday, or was it Christmas? For Christmas, and I didn't end up loving it, but I will say the last 30% of the book really did redeem itself. It was really good, so I gave it a 3-star because like the ending was super wild. So maybe she's really known for like coming in at the end and giving a plot twist. Okay, the next book I read was Butcher and Blackbird. That is from the Ruinous Love Trilogy. It's book 1. It's by Brian Weaver. I gave it a 4.5. Serial killer lovers killing other serial killers who are actually bad people. It's a pretty cool storyline. It's a little grotesque. If you are someone who has a very weak stomach, just do not walk away. I would say though that it was really fun and fresh and just a really different take on anything I've ever read before. So I really did like it. I'm gonna skip over some of the children's books that I reviewed because you probably don't care. The next book that I read was Happy Place. It was amazing by Emily Henry. I 5-starred this. Coming of age story about friends who are growing up together and their lives are going in different directions, but they're trying to maintain that close connection. There's also a love story that loved once broken and is trying to find its way back, and it was just beautiful and haunting. One of my favorite quotes from this book is, even when something falls apart, the making of it still mattered. I just thought that was really great because I'm actually a child of divorce, and there's a lot of elements in this book that talk about divorce, and so it just made me feel very validated that even though my parents' marriage fell apart, like the making of our whole childhood and the memories that we have really mattered. So 5-star, Emily Henry. I feel like everything she's gonna write is just gonna be a 5-star for me automatically. The next book I read was Fish Out of Water by Katie Regal. We're coming towards the end of the line, don't worry. Katie Regal is a huge author for a lot of people, but she's just not for me. I felt like it was a 2-star for me. It was basically a girl, it's a romance book with a missing person element, a girl looking for her lost sister, and she enlists the help of a hermit author who doesn't want to help her. There's forced proximity, there's grumpy sunshine, but it was just really boring. So I don't recommend this book. I would say of the whole list, this is probably the most boring. The next book I read was Gareth Brown, The Book of Doors. This was an advanced reader copy, 5-star, amazing. There's enchanted books, there's mystery, there's, I guess, ancient magic. There's a lot going on. These enchanted books give you help in your life to someone they're fated to. So like there's a book of shadows, there's a book of luck, there's a book of doors, and of course if the book of doors exists, you can teleport. There's a lot of really cool elements. There's a great friendship in the book. There's so much mystery and there's so many plot twists, so great book. The last book I read of the month was Little Strength, Big God, Discover a God Greater Than Your Goliath. This is by Debbie Wilson. I gave it a 2-star. I just thought it was extremely boring. There was a lot of stories in it that I just learned in Sunday school. It really wasn't very deep or fresh, and I just kind of felt like it was boring. So that is my January wrap up. I hope you enjoyed some of those books. I hope that you've read some of them. Comment below if you have, and I will see you next time on a February wrap up. Bye-bye.